everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on the program where we cover the most interesting live trials and legal stories in the news today. And you are joining us on a great day because we are covering multiple live trials today, a lot to talk about. Let's get started. First up, I wanted to let you know that we are planning to be live any moment in Ohio in the Claudia Herrig case, day 2 of this really fascinating new trial we're covering here on Law and Crime. A woman is charged with murdering her husband, Air Force Reserve Major Carl Herrig, back in March of 2007. It's alleged that she shot him in cold blood and then fled to Brazil for 10 years before she was finally extradited back to the U.S. to face trial. Her statements that she has made leading up to the trial have been something to really follow. It is an interesting case, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of areas of law to concern. And also interesting to note that the defense is not denying that she did this, but that they're saying you have to understand their relationship, and that when she killed him, she was in a fit of rage. We are going to be live in that courtroom today. Also, right now, I'm keeping a very careful eye on the courtroom feed because we're also expecting to be live in the Jeremiah Monell case out of New Jersey. This man is charged with the brutal murder, the brutal stabbing death of his wife, Tara O'Shea Watson. It's alleged that he stabbed her at least 48 times, a really brutal attack that was, and then the most tragic aspect of this whole case, the body was discovered by the couple's 12-year-old son, Jeremiah Monell Jr., who took the stand last week. Interesting note in this case, we expected to be live in that courtroom yesterday, but for some reason there was an unexpected issue and court was asked to be resumed today. We're still learning the details of what will happen, but we expect a live feed any minute now. So as soon as we have it, we'll make sure to go there. I do want to also let you know that later on in the program, we're going to continue our coverage in the Charles Merritt case out of California. Now, this is the McStay family murder case. We have been following this back and forth, and our very own executive trial producer, Kathy Russin, has been at that courtroom reporting back to us. Charles Merritt, 61 years old, is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder in connection with the killings of Joseph McStay, his wife Summer, and their 2 sons, Gianni, who was 4 years old, and Joseph Jr., who is 3 years old. The bodies of these 4 people were discovered in 2 shallow graves in the Mojave Desert back in 2013, 3 years after they disappeared. Prosecutors say that Mr. Merritt killed this family for financial gain, that he wanted to embezzle funds from the Merritt family. The defense is saying that the state has the wrong man, that it's really an alternative suspect, a man named Daniel Kavanaugh, another business associate of Joseph McStay, who's to blame. He, too, had a financial motive. As you can see, there's a lot going on with these live trials, but that's not the only thing happening here today. I do want to also let you know that at around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are expecting to get the verdict in the police cover-up trial out of Chicago, Illinois. You might remember that 3 officers were charged with covering up the details of the Laquan McDonald shooting. Jason Van Dyke was found guilty of second-degree murder and multiple counts of aggravated battery in connection with shooting this young man. And it was alleged that these officers, among other things, falsified their police reports in order to protect their brother officer. They are charged with obstruction of justice, official misconduct, and other charges related to this. It is everybody's been waiting for this verdict. It's a bench trial. The judge is going to decide this, and we expect the verdict today at 2 p.m. You're not going to want to miss any of that. Now, we have a lot to talk about. As we wait for the live feed, in case nobody knows what's been happening in the Merritt case, because sometimes there's so many moving details, our very own Rachel Stockman has a special report about what you might have missed in this case. So let's take a look at that right now. Okay, I think we're still working on getting that. While we do, maybe I can bring in my guest. I think I can. Law and Crime trial analyst Jonna Spilbor is with us. Jonna, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jesse.
What a day. What a day.
A lot.
What are you looking forward to the most today?
You know what? I'm going to be honest. I am looking forward to the verdict in the cop cover-up case. We covered that originally, and I am very interested to find out what this judge is going to do.
Not an easy decision.
Not an easy decision, and the reason why there's such a gap of time is because it was a bench trial, so it's a little bit unusual. Our viewers might want to know about that. And I like to predict sometimes, you know, because I'm right 50% of the time. And
50% of the time?
50% of the time.
All the time.
Right. And I don't know which way this is going to go.
Okay, well, we are going to cover that. Remember, these officers are charged with conspiracy, official misconduct, and obstruction of justice, so who knows which way it's going to go. I'm getting a report now that we do have that special report on the Merritt trial. So again, let's take a look at this.
Charles Merritt is facing murder charges for allegedly killing a family of 4 and burying their bodies in the desert. Joseph, Summer, Gianni, and Joseph McStay Jr. vanished from their Southern California home on February 4, 2010. Police found no evidence of struggle or foul play, but did identify signs that the family left in a hurry. The family car was found 4 days later abandoned at the Mexican border with no sign of the McStays. Law enforcement eventually believed the family fled to Mexico. Surveillance video at the border showed a family of 4 resembling the McStays crossing the border on foot. Officers also found search history on the family computer about travel to Mexico and passports for children. But a grisly discovery came nearly 4 years later when an off-road motorcyclist discovered the partial remains of a child's skull on the outskirts of the Mojave Desert. A search revealed 2 shallow graves containing the remains of 3 more bodies. DNA and dental records matched the bodies to that of the McStay family. A 3-pound sledgehammer was buried with the bodies. The family had been bludgeoned to death, according to prosecutors. As law enforcement was investigating the McStay's family disappearance, San Diego detectives interviewed Charles Merritt, a business partner of Joseph McStay. According to the affidavit, it was determined that Merritt was the last person to see and talk to Joseph alive. The two had met at a fast food restaurant before the family went missing. The last cell phone activity on Joseph's phone was a call to Charles Merritt. Merritt's DNA was also found on the family car abandoned at the border on the steering wheel, the gear shift, and the radio. He claimed he never driven the car, but rode in the passenger seat with Joseph 6 weeks prior to when the family went missing. Charles Merritt is pleading not guilty to the charges. Defense attorneys are pointing to another business associate as a possible suspect. Merritt is facing 4 counts of murder. For Law & Crime, I'm Rachel Stockman.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. We expect to be live in that courtroom at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, Jonna, really interesting case. A lot of people say, hey, it's a weak circumstantial case against Mr. Merritt, but yes. I don't know. When you look at some of the evidence, he had opportunity, he had motive, and there's some evidence tying him to the crime scene as well as the gravesite. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
You know, there's some, but I do agree with people who believe it's a weak circumstantial case. And the problem, one of the many problems here, is that it's especially heart-wrenching because 2 of the victims are tiny children. And it's unfathomable, Jesse, if I can say that 10 times fast, that anybody would just consciously kill a 3- and a 4-year-old, or I believe they were at the time. So this jury is going to want to solve this mystery. The problem is the defense has some legs in that he wasn't the only person who had a motive, a financial motive to want to kill the family, and there isn't a whole lot of direct connection between him and the actual death. So it's up for grabs right now.
The only thing I'll say about what you said is you're trying to make sense of what people's actions would be. So whether he did it,
right,
whether Daniel Cavanaugh did it, whether somebody else did it, the idea that they would kill over a few $1,000s or whatever makes no sense.
True.
But then we've seen people kill for a lot less. It's hard to make sense of any of the crimes we see here on Law & Crime. Now, I'm getting word that we're live in one of our trials. I believe this is the Claudia Herrig case. I want to just confirm that this is the trial that we're live in Ohio. Great. We are live in the Claudia Herrig case right now. First witness of the day. Let's go live. Welcome back to Law & Crime, everybody. You know we have a lot of live trials to cover today, but live trials are not the only thing that we cover here on Law & Crime. There's always so much else happening in the news. So here's a special report about what else is trending in the country today. Take a look.
Today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. The family of a Texas mother missing for 10 days says they don't know any reason why she would just leave. Before her disappearance, Wade was going to meet up with a coworker for pizza and a movie. However, the family became concerned when she didn't return home, and those closest to her fear the worst. Jared Jones, Wade's ex-boyfriend and father of their child, says the family just wants to get her home safe and sound. The MVP of the 1996 World Series champion New York Yankees and former LA Dodger John Wetland was arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting a 4-year-old child in Texas. Bartonville Police Department began investigating Wetland last week after receiving a call from the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services. The alleged assault took place in Wetland's home in Bartonville between 2004 and 2006. If convicted, he could face life in prison. Police in North Carolina arrested a 51-year-old man accused of striking a preteen girl in an incident that was apparently caught on video. David Stephen Bell has been charged with assault on a child under 12 and 2 counts of assault on a female. The circumstances leading up to the incident are still under investigation. Those are today's top crime stories. I'm Rachel Stockman for Law&Crime.
Thanks, Rachel. And people are still insane. Nothing's really changed. You can go to lawandcrime.com to check out the top trending stories of the day. Okay, we have our live feed back in Ohio in the Claudia Herrig case. Remember, she is on trial for allegedly murdering her husband, Air Force Reserve Major Carl Herrig, back in March of 2007. Allegedly shot him, fled to Brazil. She was extradited back here, and now she's facing her trial. Let's go live. Okay, so this is interesting, Jonna. This is cross-examination of one of the detectives in this case talking about how the defendant fled to Brazil. But the first question they asked him, so when you conduct this investigation, you didn't disclose that you were stealing from a charity, right? Objection. Is that a fair way to impeach his credibility?
Well, apparently not, because I think the judge, once the prosecution objected to that, the judge put the kibosh on it. But any person who has taken the stand, their credibility is an issue. And can it be impeached? Yes, it can. But you can't just willy-nilly throw up anything that you want in order to accomplish that. Now, Jesse, think about this. Think how difficult it is for this witness to look that defense attorney in the eye and not be foaming at the mouth. That would make anybody angry to be accused like that on the stand.
I'm very curious. Do a lot of times attorneys try to get that response? They're not even looking for the answer, but they're just trying to invoke some response so the jury goes, oh, wait a second, who's this witness? I don't like what I see here.
And it depends. If, either side thinks that's going to help them, then sure, it's been done, and it ain't going to stop anytime soon.
I think we might be able to jump back into the courtroom. Let's do it right now.
Correct.
All right, Jonna, let's not talk about Brazil. It was difficult. It was difficult to get Claudia Herrig back here, wasn't it?
Yes. And, she's really continued to fight the fact that she was extradited from Brazil. And I'm not quite sure what the import is of this testimony. I don't think she's denying the fact that she went to Brazil. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to advance either side or the other.
I'll tell you what I think. I think that they're trying to say that she fled to Brazil because A, she killed him, and B, it was part of her plot to kill him. She knew she was going to kill him. She immediately got on that plane. This was premeditated, pre-calculated, prior calculation, and that's what this is about.
I get it. That might advance the ball a little bit for the prosecution, but it could also be had that she killed him. She killed him in a fit of rage. She's not denying that she killed him. And she wanted out and got on a plane.
Wouldn't it have been much better if she killed him in the sense of, like in a fit of rage, stayed there, called the police, said, I'm so sorry, things got heated, he was coming after me. That would have been the better move for her instead of fleeing to another country where we all know under Brazilian law she couldn't have been extradited.
Right. It would have helped her if her defense wasn't, I don't want to pay any price for this. If she wants to try to get out from under the premeditation and the aggravation, yes, that step would have helped her. I think that's what the defense is going for anyway. They're going to try to mitigate this to something other than aggravated murder.
Maybe. Okay, this is, again, just day 2. We'll have to see which way they go. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live in that Ohio courtroom. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. So we're still live in the Claudia Herrig case. Just started up a few moments ago. This witness is currently still on the stand, and he's being grilled by the defense, A, about his credibility. He's an investigator. And 2, about also just trying to really harp on the defense's theory that she may have killed her husband, but we have to understand the circumstances, that she killed him in a fit of rage, that he wasn't a good husband, that there were issues to consider. And they're trying to mount this defense through this witness. There's been a back and forth of objections by the state. This is kind of Interesting, considering yesterday during the opening statement by the state, the defense kept objecting. This is really a tense back and forth. I'm back here with Jonna Spilbor. We're going to jump live in that courtroom in a second, but what do you make so far between the prosecution and the defense? It's pretty heated.
It is heated, and that's probably by design, because you got to remember, when you engage in this kind of combativeness on the stand, you are either you're trying to, or you're certainly accomplishing distracting the jury. And in a case like this, that might be helpful to the defense more than the prosecution.
Okay, let's jump back live into the courtroom right now. One thing, this is a very interesting case to follow. No boring moment in this trial. I'm back here with Jonna Spilbor. I still think what they're trying to get at for the defense is this wasn't a pre-calculated, this wasn't a calculated murder. This was just a heat of the moment kind of thing. Is that what you're getting?
That's precisely where they're going. And it's interesting because that's not going to get an acquittal in this case, Jesse, which usually is the end game. That's going to, if they're successful, reduce this from an aggravated murder to something else, possibly voluntary manslaughter.
Battered woman syndrome, is that something that would have worked to get an acquittal? Because what I've read about this case is they tried to put forward those experts, but they couldn't get them in. There was I don't even think they would be able to testify in this case. I don't think they could get them to testify. So would that have been a way to get an acquittal? Which
I find strange that they couldn't, because when I examined this case, the first thing I thought of is, oh, she's going to mount some sort of battered woman defense, which isn't a defense in and of itself. It's part of a self-defense defense. So, in my opinion, it takes the wind out of their sails that they're not presenting that kind of information and are simply trying to show that this was not premeditated at all. It was more of a heat-in-the-moment crime of passion, if you will.
Because what are they getting? They're getting from this witness that, yes, they had problems in their marriage. Yes, she was transferring money to Brazil, but that's something that she did. And maybe even more importantly, the gun, she didn't hide it. It was right there to see. I think we can jump back into the courtroom. Let's do that right now. All right, a lot of interesting details. Jonna, this thing about the string.
Yeah.
What did you make of that? Was it an idea about the potential suicide or booby trapping?
Okay, so this is funny. And again, this is what could be going on in the minds of the jury. When I heard that, I thought that there was some evidence that she wanted to kill herself. That's part of her defense. And that she didn't have the guts to put a gun to her, and I don't mean it that way, but she didn't want to do it directly, so she was going to booby trap herself, so to speak, and slam a door, and that would kill her and end her life, because that was part of her plan. But you took it a whole different way, and again, you got people sitting in a jury box who could also interpret that a different way.
Yeah, because they said, did you ever recover any string? No, there was no string tied to the trigger. A lot of questions we have in this case. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live in the courtroom, so stay tuned here on Law and Crime. Okay, a lot to talk about. Jonna, if she was in fact suicidal, and if she did in fact want to commit suicide that day, and if in fact he did say to her, I don't really care what happened, just make sure you don't do it in here, do it in the basement.
Right.
Does that really affect the case?
It could. It's going to depend how it affects the jury, because, look, does it mitigate it? Does it show that she really wasn't pre-planning this? She wasn't a cold-blooded killer? It could.
Is that enough to set somebody off?
Is it a direct line? You're going to need an expert, Jesse. I think the defense is going to need an expert to testify to that. Yeah. We can't answer that question.
And it's going to be up to the jury to ultimately decide what is that statement, if they believe it was made, what impact does it ultimately have? But so far, day 2 has already been pretty exciting with this witness. Even from the opening statements, it's been an exciting case to follow. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break on our end. But when we come back, we're going to be live in this courtroom, a brand new trial that we're covering here on the network. And we have a busy day with other live trials and other all across the country. So we're going to want you to stay tuned. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us here on a very busy day. I want to let you know we have an update in one trial and an update in another. Let's talk about it right now. First up, if you want to follow the Jeremiah Monell case out of New Jersey, it just started up, and guess what? The defense is putting on a case. We weren't sure if that was going to happen. So if you want to follow this trial about a man who's charged with the brutal death of his wife, then you can go to lawandcrime.com right now to follow it. to follow it. Right here on the network, though, we're going to go back live into the Claudia Herrig case. We believe that it is a redirect of a key witness currently on the stand. Let's go live there. This has been an interesting back and forth. Remember, she has been charged with the murder of her husband. Let's go live.
We're along that line in a pretty close proximity. That's where the rounds came from.
All right.
Nothing, Judge. Thank you.
All right, please step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Call the statement. Next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Kevin Anderson.
Okay, there's always so much to talk about in this case.
Yeah.
Really, it's already started so much. The interesting thing, let's just talk about Brazil 1 second.
Okay.
Again, she went there, took a whole process to get her extradited back because she was the prosecutors here in the United States were able to convince the Supreme Court in Brazil that she had renounced her Brazilian citizenship, and they stripped it away for her, and they were able to eventually get her arrested and sent back here. The question is, why do we even have these extradition laws? It seems unfair in the sense that if she had really killed her husband, murdered him, and she could just go to another country and live scot-free, how's that fair?
That's why we need the extradition laws, because if you ever wanted to kill anybody, your exit strategy would be get on a plane and go to another country and you'd be home free, so we can't have that. That's why we need to have...
Let me rephrase. The Brazilian Constitution says that they couldn't extradite her for crimes that she might have committed in another country. Why is that fair?
And it's not. But some countries, every country is allowed to do what they want in terms of extradition or not having extradition treaties with the United States, and I guess Brazil is one of them. I guarantee you she knew that in advance because she was a Brazilian citizen, and that, to me, is a step improving premeditation and planning here.
Yeah, this has been a very novel case. Let's go live into the courtroom, and we'll learn a little bit more from the second witness of the day. Now, Jonna, we can't forget that they're claiming this is a premeditated murder, right?
Yes.
One of the ways they're saying this is the action she took before the shooting, buying the gun, practice, target practice. I'm curious what you make of that.
Well, I think the prosecution's going to have to do more than simply prove that she at some point prior to committing this offense bought a gun. A lot of people buy guns. A lot of people buy guns for legitimate purposes.
.357 revolver, a lot of stopping power.
I have one of those. They're good guns. No,
wait,
but
let me just move out of frame right now.
so you don't have to worry. But so they're going to have to connect. They're creating a dot, Jesse, and they've got to connect it to another dot. They have to prove or show that it wasn't simply an innocent purchase. Now, is that the only gun that she bought? Did she actually have a fear? Did she live in an area where there was some fear? Was there something else that caused her to buy that gun other than premeditating to off her husband? I think that's a crucial step.
Buying the gun, target practice, never looks good.
I will say, if you buy a gun, you should practice with it when you're using it for self-defense.
Well, that's a good point, and maybe that's the point that they'll make later on in the case. Let's jump back live into the courtroom right now. Okay, so really, people might look at this and think it's not that interesting, but it really is crucial for this case, isn't it, Jonna?
Jesse, I think we just got a very interesting fact here, if I heard it correctly. She bought the gun, Claudia, the defendant, Herrig, bought the gun in the same month and year that her husband, that it was used on her husband.
What does it tell you?
That tells me that there could be premeditation and planning. And here's why. If you're buying a gun for just any old purpose, and she might contend that she was, it's not going to be, you're not going to immediately use it on your husband. As I said, I'm a gun owner. You practice, you keep it safe, you lock it up. You don't just buy a gun and then all of a sudden decide to off your husband. I think it's too tenuous. I mean, too close in time.
The number of shots as well, 2 to the back, I believe, 1 in the head. I mean, does that look like a fit of rage, or does that look like more of an assassination?
Oh, and that's going to be another interesting point, right? For the jury to contend with. Was this done... If she didn't know how to use a gun, those are pretty precise shots, no?
Right, and also the location of the shots as well. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be live in the courtroom. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. We're about to be back live in the Claudia Herrig trial. The witness who was just on the stand was excused. We're waiting for a new witness to jump on. I think it's about to happen. This is a really exciting case about a woman who's charged with the murder of her husband back in March of 2007. She then fled to Brazil and was finally extradited back here to the United States, where she's currently facing her trial. She's complained about that, as Jonna Spilbor mentioned earlier. In fact, Jonna, she's been complaining about a lot while she's been in jail, hasn't she?
She's been complaining about a lot. Not unusual, but she's made some pretty strange requests. Like, I think one of them involved she was not provided with a nail clipper so that she could give herself a pedicure.
She thought she was going to get an infection because apparently the jail floors weren't disinfected properly.
And I didn't know that I guess it's common practice to file your nails on the prison floor. Who knew? I did not know.
When you got to look good, you got to look good. This has been a really interesting case, and again, I want to just talk about Brazil for a second. I can't get enough about this. She was a Brazilian citizen, right? She fled to Brazil. Brazilian constitution says she can't be extradited to face criminal prosecutions in another country. The prosecutors in this state were able to convince the Supreme Court in Brazil that she renounced her Brazilian citizenship when she became a U.S. citizen.
And
this makes no sense.
It would not have happened but for the extra efforts of people in this country. If they had just let this case go, she'd still be sipping margaritas in Brazil and having a good old time.
Well, isn't this a rare thing to have? I mean, this didn't really ever happen before in Brazil.
This type of situation?
Yes.
No, it was rare. But again, she's only back here because of the efforts of people in the United States.
Okay, let's go back live into the courtroom. A new witness is on the stand. Okay, so a firearms expert is now on the stand in the Claudia Herrig case. Jonna, seems pretty rudimentary. I mean, why do we have this witness coming on, you think?
It is rudimentary, but it's also important because here's where we are. The state has now at least attempted to prove that Claudia Herrig bought a gun. She bought a gun the same month her husband was killed, and that her husband was killed with that gun. It's important for the prosecution to be able to prove that, because if they're trying to say she premeditated this murder, went and bought a gun for that purpose, and it was a different gun that killed her husband, that could help the defense, at least a little bit.
In order to prove that murder charge, they need to show a firearm was used. Some of it is just so simple about proving this case, and these witnesses really are important for those facts. Now, I want to give you an update in what's going on in the Jeremiah Monell case out of New Jersey. We have gotten word that the defense has officially rested. And interestingly, they only called one witness, a motel manager where Monell stayed. We expect the closing arguments in the Jeremiah Monell case at around 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so we'll update you as soon as that begins, and if there's any other information from that courtroom, we'll make sure to let you know. In the meantime, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live, and we have a lot to discuss. We'll be right back. I want to ask you, Jonna, a .357 Magnum handgun, which is the one they believe is the murder weapon. Are you familiar with this weapon? What is the stopping force of this weapon? We believe he was shot 3 times with this gun. What can you tell us about it?
So this is what I can tell you about the gun, at least mine. It is a much easier trigger pull. You can pull the trigger one of 2 ways. You can cock it yourself, pull the trigger, it makes it exceedingly easy to pull the trigger. Boom, boom, boom. Or you cannot. Your first shot would not be cocked, and that would require additional pounds of pressure to pull that first bullet. But once you pull that first bullet, you'd have to either cock it to make it easier, or you would, again, have that additional trigger pull. If he were shot 3 times, I don't know if she didn't cock the gun, but that is my experience.
Is there a lot of recoil on that?
Well, I always think there's a lot of recoil whenever I shoot any of my guns, but I would, generally a person would probably say no, not a lot of recoil.
Interesting. Let's go back live. Again, a firearms examiner is on the stand. This is the Claudia Herrig case out of Ohio. Okay, Jonna, you know what I'm thinking about?
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking if the defense is saying that, you got to understand the relationship, what happened the day of the shooting, do you put the defendant on the stand? Because clearly she's very vocal about her conditions in jail and everything that's happening.
Yes.
Maybe she wants her opportunity to speak.
So you and I kind of think alike, because I was wondering the same thing. And in a case like this where she's presenting, it's like not quite an affirmative defense of self-defense, but it kind of is. You almost have to put her on the stand to explain her state of mind. Otherwise, how will the defense ever get across that she was verbally abused and what led up to her pretty much snapping the day that this killing was committed?
Snapping without the battered women syndrome expert, because again, we believe that they could not get those experts on the stand. So it's interesting to see. I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if we do see the testimony of the defendant, but we'll have to see. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll be back live in that Ohio courtroom. Stay tuned. Okay, so I stand corrected. That was actually the defense cross-examining this witness from today. And as you can see, it gets a little heated there. Back here with Law and Crime trial analyst Jonna Spilbor to talk more about it. Yes, it got heated. Yes, they're trying to impeach his credibility, but they're also making interesting points about her behavior after the shooting. What did you make of it?
Well, first of all, I think the defense the defense attempts to attack this investigator's credibility kind of fell short, because we finally got to hear that exchange. And obviously, the defense attorney is accusing him of doing something wrong in a prior case, right? Didn't you lie on an affidavit? An affidavit is a sworn statement from anybody. And then the investigator sort of stumbles, but he offers, do you want an explanation? And obviously, the defense attorney didn't want that explanation because it probably would have restored his credibility, so he just said, I'll move on. I think there was a very ineffective exchange on behalf of the defense. Don't you? I mean,
yeah, I do. But the interesting thing that I took from that is trying to understand, was she planning this out? Was there anything nefarious? The fact that she had these bank accounts, was there anything out of the odd that she was sending money to Brazil? I mean, how much did she plan this trip to Brazil, after the shooting?
So, and let's ask that question a different way. Does it matter? In other words, could the defense come in and say, this wasn't planning, this was panic? Or can the defense come in and say, she was planning to go to Brazil anyway, having nothing to do with this shooting?
Let's listen to a little bit more of the investigation when this witness was cross-examined from earlier this morning. Okay, Jonna, first question, is he being evasive or does he just not remember?
No, I don't think he's being evasive at all. You have to remember a couple things. Number one, this all happened a dozen years ago, right? He's not recounting an investigation that happened yesterday. It happened a long time ago. And number two, what the defense attorney is attempting to do here is to prove a negative. Did you get that line of questioning where he's saying, you didn't find evidence of this and you didn't find evidence of that? No, 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 no. So it's not him being evasive. It's the defense really trying to prove something that didn't happen.
What's interesting about his testimony, it kind of sheds light on the fact there's two different narratives here, right? So the prosecution says, don't believe the defendant's story that she was about to commit suicide, the husband didn't care, she went into a fit of rage and killed him. This was more a cold-blooded murder. I'm curious your thoughts on the two different theories here.
Objectively, the two different theories can have legs. Where we are right now in this trial, it's hard to say which side is going to have more legs. I mean, I don't think it's that effective for a defense attorney to say, so you didn't find a Google search on her computer that she was trying to Google murder or how to get away with murder or the best way to prove murder. You don't need to do that, Jesse. I mean, she had a gun, she shot her husband. That's really not even the issue.
It's a different kind of case to follow, I'll tell you that much. Now, Jonna, I know our time together is coming to an end, unfortunately.
It's over already.
It goes by so quickly, doesn't
it?
I know. Great seeing you. Thanks for coming on. Come back.
Thank you. I will.
All right. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're expecting the live feed back in the Claudia Herrig case, and either way, we have a lot to cover. So stay tuned here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back.